Auburn basketball has announced their SEC schedule for both men and women's basketball. Let's take a look into it, man. Let's get inside the town.
The Auburn Express. You are now listening to the War Report Longtown Podcast. With your boy Ike Jones.
Lobtown Podcast, Ike Jones in here, part of the Auburn Express, powered by the War Report. We are here. Thank you so much for turning us up and turning us on every single time you need an update on what's going on with Auburn sports. We're talking Auburn basketball today. We will get it kicked off talking a little Auburn men's basketball. SEC schedules have been released, so we do know a little bit about who Auburn is going to be playing this upcoming season and when. Actually, Auburn has some some preseason stuff that's going on as well. So we know a little bit about what Auburn men's basketball is going to look like before they get into SEC play. The first schedule game, now this is not going to be, of course, the totality of the games that they play, because these are all the P4 matchups that are currently on the schedule. Is going to be against Oklahoma. That is on October the 15th at 7 p.m. in Birmingham. The Battle for Boutwell Auditorium. The Battle for Boutwell is going to be going down in Birmingham, or the Battle of Birmingham, whatever it is. It's going to be going down at Boutwell Auditorium here in Birmingham, Alabama. So I'll definitely be at that one there on October 15th. It's in the middle of football season. So those of you who want to try to get your basketball fix in, we will have some basketball for you there. The battle Balling in Boutwell is actually the name of that, in Boutwell Auditorium. So that's going to be going down October 15th. And then you get a game at State Farm Arena versus Memphis in an exhibition game. So it's not going to count towards the overall situation there in Atlanta. But 7:30 p.m. on October the 30th. So just 15 days later, they will be playing against Memphis in an exhibition game. So that Oklahoma State, is an exhibition as well. So an opportunity for you to see the Tigers early in the season. But then you get into the players era, which we've talked about a little bit on the channel already, but Auburn faces Oregon and Michigan there in Las Vegas on November 24th and 25th. Wish I could go out there to that one in Vegas, but that's going to be right around the time of both Thanksgiving and the Iron Bowl. I don't know how I'm going to make that work, but Auburn's got a healthy slate there at players area. Then you get into the ACC SEC Challenge, where Auburn will be facing off against NC State on December the 3rd. So those are all the games that we know before SEC play starts. Now, of course, again, you're going to get some other games mixed in there. Players area, you have an opportunity to get somebody else there in that tournament. And then you're going to get some of the other non-P4 opponents that are going to be in the pre-SEC play, the non-con going into that. Usually you're going to get, 12, 15 games before you get an SEC play. I don't know what it actually turns out to be, but still, you're going to get a healthy dose of Auburn basketball going into SEC play to kind of figure out where the team is and kind of get your bearings about what's going to be happening throughout SEC play. But once SEC play begins, we do have that schedule game by game. Let's take a look at that here. The Auburn schedule is as follows. They open up with Georgia on the road in Stegman Coliseum. That Georgia team revamping, a lot of talent was on that team last year. Very tough, gritty, physical team. They're going to be that way again. Mike White always has his teams defensively prepared and has been a problem for Bruce Pearl as far as the way that they defend since he has been a coach in the SEC. I don't expect that to falter this year. Now, they're going to have some revamping, of course, that they need to do. Because a lot of what they had from production is gone. Silas Demery exited via the transfer portal, and then Asa Newell went to the NBA draft. So two of their high producers, they still have some other guys on that team. I'm not going to dive into the Georgia roster today, but they will have some opportunities to be a good team there in Georgia because they've recruited decently in Georgia, and they're definitely willing to go out there and spend the money for that athletic program. Next up, you have Texas A&M, which is going to be a new challenge, no longer led by Buzz Williams, but coming into Neville Arena. You've got Texas A&M coming to town with their new head coach, trying to figure out what that new identity is going to be there in Texas A&M. So it's going to be interesting to see now that you don't have the Buzz Williams challenge. Can Auburn get over the Texas A&M hurdle that they've had the last few seasons? Next up, you've got Arkansas at home there on January the 10th. That's going to be a good matchup. Calipari in his second season at Arkansas, trying to build something that's going to look like a consistent winner. They started to kind of pick up some steam towards the end of last season, gave Auburn a test there inside of Neville Arena last year. So Arkansas looking to come in and, that's a roster that's going to be turning over a lot of guys. And it's not the one and done category like you would typically get from a Calipari team. It really the transfer portal and the NBA draft a little bit, but the transfer portal decimated that team quite a bit. Some of their, Boogie Flan left. He didn't play during that Auburn game, but he was going to be one of the guys that was supposed to be one of the, diaper dandies, right? Freshman All-American type guys ended up being hurt for the vast majority of the season. But he's gone, and you've got a lot of pieces that are going to be missing from what was last year's Arkansas team. An early test in the SEC season for both of these squads. And, listen, we're talking about revamping rosters. Auburn definitely is going to have a brand new squad as well. So almost no one who played in that game last year inside of Neville is going to be playing for either of those teams. A handful of players will be returning. Then you make the trip to Como to play against a Missouri team that was really kind of one of the surprise teams in the SEC last year because of what had happened the previous season where they looked abysmal in SEC play. This year, they had an opportunity to make a run. They went all the way to the NCAA tournament. People were picking them as potentially some upset. I had them as one of the sleeper teams in the NCAA tournament making a run. Didn't really pan out that way for them, but definitely Coach Dennis Gates knows how to put a consistent defensive team out there, and he's going to have some guys coming back this season for him. So that test inside of Como is going to be a good one early in the season. Last year, it was earlier in the season as well for SEC play. This year, it's in the first 4 games, but going to be interesting to see what that Missouri team looks like in this new world of college basketball where everybody seems like they're reshuffling the deck. Missouri's got quite a bit of people that they need to figure out there, and their team is going to look different as Auburn makes the trip there. South Carolina comes up next on the schedule, a South Carolina team that was disappointing last year in SEC play. No two ways about it. They've got to figure some things out with their basketball squad. They lose Colin Murray-Boyles to the NBA draft. He was by far their best player. Nick Pringle exited during the transfer portal. So they've got some things that they have to figure out. Their starting point guard left. What's my man's name that's bouncing back and forth between them and Ohio State, left again. Like they just South Carolina's got some work to do there to figure out how they're going to get some stability in that program. But again, that's another team. I don't even know what to expect from South Carolina because they have so many new pieces, and even the pieces that they do return aren't really pieces that are known quantities for them. So going to be interesting to see what that's like, but that will be at home inside of Neville Arena for Auburn that time. Then you go to Ole Miss, and the last time that Auburn was in the Pavilion, it was a blowout game, right? Auburn really handled business this last time that they were there. Really, they handled business all times versus Ole Miss in the regular season. They had the 2 games, and both of them Auburn handled those handily, dealt with them handily. Well, let me not say the first one wasn't a blowout, right? Like they won the game by, I think it was a double-digit situation, but it was a little hairy there for a minute in that game. And Auburn kind of pulled away late. But that Ole Miss team going through a lot of revamping as well. Chris Beard trying to figure out how to stabilize the ship there. They're probably going to be playing through the post a little bit more this season coming up. That's kind of where not all of there, but the talent that's remaining on that team is going to be focused on trying to figure out how to play through their big men there. So it's going to be a different look from that up and down squad that they had with the last couple of seasons, really trying to be a running team. I don't know how much they're going to be running this team with Dia as kind of the focal point, which I think right. Again, I don't know. We haven't seen him play. I do think that they're going to try to play through Malik Dia a little bit more this year. So it's going to give that squad a different look and feel. Even though Dia likes to step out and shoot a little bit, he is a post player, and I think he wants to be this year's Janai Broom, a guy who's going to be dominant in the post, and teams are just going to have to come and double team to figure out how to do what they need to do to stop that team offensively. I'm looking forward to seeing what Chris Beard cooks up there, and Auburn will make the trip there on January 20th or 21st. It says there. It's kind of a swing game. Then a place that has not been kind to Auburn. Auburn has to make the trip to Florida to play against the Gators, the defending national champion Florida Gators, or the returning national champions. I mean, people don't like the term defending national champions. It's just a lot of those guys aren't going to be there, but there will be some people from that Florida team that are returning. They're not going to have, of course, quite a bit of the backcourt that's going to be there is going to be gone, but they still have quite a bit of that front court that was so menacing and great on the offensive glass there for Florida. But Auburn has to make a trip to a place that they have not won in a long time. So they have to go out there and figure out how to get a win in Gainesville versus the Gators. They will be doing that again against a team, a program that is coming off of a national championship win, and Auburn will have its work cut out for them. Auburn makes the trip back home to face Texas next there the weekend of January 27th and 28th. So the Texas team, Auburn handled them on their home floor last year. Texas is going through some transitions with their program as well. I feel like that's going to be the theme of everything we're talking about here is transitions with programs. But the Texas team that is going to be looking for a new identity again this season because a lot of what they had last year is gone. Their dynamic freshman Trey Johnson no longer there with them. How are they going to reload the deck there for that Texas squad? Going to be interesting to see how that pans out. You get Tennessee at Tennessee. You're going to Knoxville in a game inside of Thompson Bowling Arena. I've made that trip a couple of times to go face them, and it hasn't been a pretty situation, but Auburn was able to get the win last year at home versus Tennessee. Can they go on the road and win inside of Thompson Bowling? That's going to be an interesting game there versus Tennessee. And then you get the first of two matchups versus the Tide. It's home this time first versus the Tide. You get them on February the 7th, and that's going to be a Saturday game. Very great to have the week off before that game, right? You don't have the midweek game before that. After you leave the Tennessee game, you're going to have that midweek break before you have to play that Saturday game versus the Tide in your home arena. And then right after that, I think this is very similar to how it was last year as far as like you're playing Vanderbilt and Bama within close proximity of one another. But Vanderbilt makes the trip home, so you have the back-to-back home games there, but you get that game there on the midweek versus Vandy. And you get an opportunity to see that new look Vanderbilt squad. Vanderbilt, another team that's going to be shuffling the deck this season because of some attrition that they had on their team. You make the trip to Fayetteville. Has not been a great trip there to Bud Walton for Auburn, but making that trip to Fayetteville this time, coming up that next Saturday to play Arkansas for the second time in the season. That is the first of their repeats during the year there versus Arkansas. So you have a couple of teams that you're going to be playing multiple times. Arkansas will be the first of those, and you make the trip to Bud Walton. I can't remember the last time that Auburn played Arkansas twice in a season, but this is going to be one of those times. So you get to see Calipari twice this year if you are an Auburn Tigers fan. And get an opportunity to see him at home, of course, and away there at Bud Walton. The next game coming up on that following midweek is going to be at Mississippi State in Starkville, going inside the hump, trying to get a win versus, again, another defensive, tough-minded team that is going to be returning some pieces, but you got one of those pieces that were supposed to be returning from them in Murphy, so he's going to be making a homegoing of sorts. Now, he's from the state of Alabama when he played high school here in Birmingham at Ramsey High School, but he's going to be making the trip back to the place where he started his collegiate career, so you're going to see Kashawn Murphy have an opportunity to play against his former team. Going to be interesting to see whether or not there's some animosity, hostility amongst the locals there for seeing him come back into their arena. But that Coliseum is going to be buzzing. The hump always going crazy, especially when you've got SEC play looming there. You go and you get Kentucky at home this time. You went on the road to Kentucky last year. This time, Mark Pope is bringing the Kentucky Wildcats inside of Neville Arena to play against Auburn on February the 21st. So year two of Mark Pope. Auburn handled business last time when they got there to play up there in Kentucky. Are they going to be able to handle business at home this time? Last time Kentucky came and played a home game. Now it was, of course, a Calipari coach team. That Kentucky team was able to get the win there inside of Neville. Can Auburn avoid that this time versus Kentucky? On the road to Norman. So this is the football team will be making the trip to Norman. Basketball's making the trip to Norman as well, out there to Oklahoma to face against the Sooners. Again, Oklahoma is another team that's going to be without their stud freshman that made the trip, or excuse me, that made the jump up to the professional ranks during the offseason. What is that Oklahoma team going to look like? Because he was a large portion of what they did offensively last season, and a team that didn't really particularly have a great defense. Are they going to be able to reshuffle the deck and figure out either how to play better defense or get someone else to play offense? Because otherwise, that Oklahoma team is going to be struggling this year. I don't pretend to know a lot about what they've been doing during the offseason, but I promise you, get into that as we get closer to the season so we can see what we got going on there. But no fears. No fear, Auburn will be making the trip there. We'll see what's going on. The next of the double ups is versus Ole Miss. Ole Miss makes the trip to Neville Arena. Auburn getting an opportunity to get them a second time. And then they are versus LSU at home. So back-to-back home games there. LSU, another team that really had a lot of injuries and guys that they expected to contribute to the team last year, not able to do that last year for that team. It really wasn't much of a contest at LSU last year. Going to be interesting to see what happens this season for them as they figure out how to revamp that program that had been doing. I mean, LSU's been down for a few years in basketball, but they've been better. You know, the Will Wade years, they were a little bit better. Will Wade, of course, going to be a team that Auburn has to face. Will Wade with the NC State matchup that they have for the ACC SEC Challenge. But is that LSU basketball team ready to rebound and get into a better position? And then you finish the season at Coleman Coliseum. Going to be another raucous environment. That Bama team, again, you've played them already once that year. Who's going to be able to get the sweep at that point in time is going to be the narrative around that game. And what are going to be the standings at that point in time? Last year, Auburn had already clinched the regular season title, so it took a little bit of sting out of that game and the loss, and Auburn's going to be looking to get a little vengeance. Both teams looking for some home court vengeance, as Auburn was able to get the win in Coleman last year, and then Bama was able to get the win inside of Neville last year. So all of those games, very intriguing. What I would like to know from you all who are watching this, what stretch to you seems like the most interesting, the most daunting? As I'm sitting here looking at it, that Tennessee-Bama stretch right there, you're thankful to have the midweek off between those games, but those are going to be back-to-back games that are going to be super interesting. You've got the stretch that's a little bit tighter there because of the proximity of the games, but you've got two road games, one at Arkansas and then one at Mississippi State. And then you come back home and you face Kentucky. So that 3-game stretch is pretty tough. And you've got that Vandy game sandwiched in between the other two that I just talked about with Tennessee and Alabama. So that seems like that's going to be a pretty tough stretch. Because I don't know what Texas A&M is going to look like this year, it's difficult for me, right? Like if this had been a Buzz Williams Texas A&M team, I could tell you, okay, they're going to be a hard-nosed defensive team and they're going to, play this zone defense, and that's going to be a really tough physical matchup for Auburn. And then they'd have to go at home and try to face Calipari coached up and down the floor pace Arkansas team. I don't know the answer to that right now. So as I look at the schedule, I know you're going to have a tough physical contest against Georgia because that's just the nature of a Mike White coach team. I know you're going to get some pace from both a Calipari and a Dennis Gates coach team. So you do have those teams, and you're going home Arkansas and then on the road to Missouri in those games in short order. But I think where you're going to be looking at, teams that are in the beginning of the season going to be picked pretty high in most people's assumptions. You're going to have the Calipari coach team that's going to get a lot of buzz just because of who he is and how they finished the year last year, making it to the tournament after looking dead in the water pretty early in that season. But Tennessee's going to be up there for sure. Alabama's going to be up there for sure. So that's a very tough stretch right there with those games back to back. Again, thankfully, you have the midweek break there. And then you get Arkansas and Mississippi State on back-to-back road trips there. That is going to be a tough stretch there for Auburn. So love to know from you all, which games are you most looking forward to? What home game, other than the Bama game, because I think that's an easy one, what home game are you circling on the calendar to say, man, I definitely want to be in Neville Arena if I can figure out how to get the tickets for that game? And what is going to be the toughest road game for Auburn this season in men's basketball? Let me hear all of those things right down there in the comment section, and I appreciate you guys for tapping in with that. Let's move over here and talk a little bit about women's basketball. Women's basketball, the Larry Vickers era has begun for Auburn women's basketball, or we are in the midst of that. And we're going to see what this roster that he has started to put together is looking like and how they are going to be able to fare in SEC play. We've looked at the roster a little bit, but the roster has actually changed since we last did our update. And Gina Beloso was not on the team at that time. She is a senior that came over from Florida International, but she's now one of the guards there that's going to be helping in the backcourt. So they've got that addition to the team, and then they also had an addition to the coaching staff there. And they've got some things that they're putting together there for that team, and I'm, you know, cautiously optimistic about what the results can be for this team, as far as, because I know what the pedigree of the defensive situation that Larry Vickers is going to put together. I loved what that was under Coach Johnny Harris previously. The question is whether or not the offensive philosophies that he has and the players, like let's be frank, and again, I've said this before, the quality of the player as far as their ability to just play basketball on the offensive end is better right now on this team than it was the last couple of years. You had one or two quality players, and then injuries decimated last year's team, with Talia Scott going down in that early in the season and never able to really get back into it. So that didn't help, right? But it had always seemed like, honesty, Scott Grayson, the first 2 years, Auburn really only had one primary scorer, and then you thought you were going to have the two scorers that had the ability to go fill it up last year, and then you get the injury to one of those. And then you get Yuting Donk later in the season, but she comes on late, and you really don't have an opportunity to get her acclimated to the system. So Auburn was kind of dead in the water in a lot of respects in that way, but you do have a really solid team that's going to be able to athletically compete, particularly in the ball handling and backcourt. So I am interested to see how that's going to pan out. But when we look at the schedule here for Auburn women's basketball, the only non-con game that has been announced so far for the team is the SEC ACC Challenge versus Syracuse. It's going to be a road game for them. So they are making the trip up to New York to play against that Syracuse Orange team. But then they begin the SEC play. And this one's interesting, right? This one's interesting to me for a few reasons, because the head coach for Mississippi State, who they begin with at Mississippi State, they made the trip there last year and got the doors blown off of them. But he was angling for the Auburn job, it seemed. A lot of reports said that he was one of the guys that was in line for that job. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not there's some sour grapes for him about not getting hired for the job, whether or not there's going to be a little bit of animosity towards anybody in that whole situation. Now, he doesn't get to play in the game, but I do wonder if there's an additional motivation for him to say, hey, look, this is why you should have hired me in this situation. And how aware, listen, Coach Larry Vickers sometimes does listen to our show. How aware is he that was a situation that was going on in the background there as they were looking at him to fill the role of the new head coach? And will there be any motivation for him in that regard to say, hey, you guys made the right hire here? So first test off the top at the hump there versus Mississippi State. Then you go and face a team that, again, back-to-back teams that absolutely decimated Auburn last year. Tennessee blew the doors off of Auburn. You get Tennessee at home in that next game there on January the 4th. So looking forward to seeing how Auburn is able to make those games a little bit more competitive than they were last year. You go to Texas in that next game. Again, a team that put it to Auburn last year. Now, that was Coach Vic Schaefer's and a team that was, poised to make a national championship run. They're in the SEC championship, all of those things, right? But is Auburn going to be able to make it a more competitive game this year, or even pull off a stunning victory in that situation? That's going to be really what the goal is in this season for Larry Vickers, to figure out, to figure out how to make Auburn look more competitive in these games versus these teams where, listen, women's basketball in the SEC is just as competitive as men's basketball. And I'd argue maybe even a little bit more competitive as far as the teams that can make true national championship runs. You've got quite a few of those in women's basketball here. So, and you're playing two of the three in your first three games are teams, I think, in Tennessee and in Texas that legitimately have shots to do there. Now, Texas is going to be without Madison Booker, who was their all everything player last year. They're going to be without some of the veteran leadership that they had in the backcourt. So, going to be a different team, but I expect Vic Schaefer is going to be very similar to how Johnny Harris, always going to have a defensive squad, always able to shut your water off. Can they figure out how to return serve in that matter? Next up for you there is Florida, a team that Auburn should have won last year versus Florida. I mean, that's just a game that they should have won. That Florida team has got a lot of talent on it, and that young talent that was remaining on the team, they went and got some more talent. So it's going to be a better Florida team, I believe, from a talent perspective this year. Are they ready to be able to make that next step? You get them at home this time, and you'll have an opportunity to get a little revenge in that game. And I'm talking about the SEC tournament game, because they won the regular season matchup between the two. But the SEC tournament, Auburn actually blew that game. So Auburn needs to get a little get back there. You get the Tide at home in the next game there on January 15th, the first opportunity for Coach Larry Vickers to be in a rivalry game in an Auburn on the Auburn sideline. How will his team be able to be ready for that? That Bama team lost a couple of key pieces for them that have been stalwarts on that program for the last couple of years. Are they ready to kind of reload there on that Alabama roster and be a competitive team again this season? Yet to be seen what that's going to look like for Alabama. Vanderbilt, a team that, again, Auburn just kind of blew that game last year. You make the trip to Vanderbilt this time, up there to Nashville. Can Auburn, really the last 2 years, Auburn blew that Vanderbilt game. They should have won that game the last two seasons, and they found ways to lose that game in both situations. Can Auburn find a way to get the dub versus Vanderbilt? Very talented Vanderbilt team, right? Like, they've got one of the best players in the country coming back, that true freshman last year. Actually, absolutely, I forgot what her stat line was for like 50 something. Like, she went crazy, including overtime there versus Auburn last year. Can Auburn find a way to shut her down, because she's going to be on the top of everybody's scouting report this year going into this season? Next up, you get Oklahoma, again, another team. And now this is unfortunately a theme for these games versus these SEC teams, is you've got a lot of teams that blew the doors off of Auburn, and Oklahoma fits that bill. Now, they were competitive throughout points in that game, but Oklahoma dominated towards the end of that situation. I think Auburn made it a little bit more interesting. I'm not looking at the score right now, but I do recall Auburn having a chance in that Oklahoma game. But Auburn's going to be looking to get Oklahoma at home this time, coming up on January 25th. The next game, South Carolina, again, another team in the SEC that is going to be competing for national championships. They're going to have national championships aspirations, and they're a team that just reloads from a talent perspective. Is Auburn ready for the challenge versus South Carolina? They'll get them at home this year, as opposed to having to making the trip up to South Carolina. So we'll see if the difference in the environment, because last time Auburn played versus South Carolina at home, it was a much closer game than a lot of people anticipated that being. Auburn didn't get the win, but they were able to make it a little bit more competitive. But that South Carolina team, again, they lost some talent to both the WNBA draft and the transfer portal, but they are constantly reloading in talent there. So don't anticipate South Carolina having much of a drop off at all. That Ole Miss team is another team that kind of has been hovering around relevancy in the SEC as far as being able to go out there and actually get an SEC title. And they're going to be playing Auburn this time at Auburn. They were on the road last time. Auburn was going to Ole Miss. So we'll see if Auburn can get a little bit of that home juice going to be able to get an SEC win at home there. You double up against Florida, so you make the trip over to the O'Connell Center and have to play against the Gators there. Can Auburn get a road win in the SEC versus the Gators? Again, a Gator team that wasn't really great last year. Auburn had their opportunities in the SEC tournament to go ahead and advance versus them, didn't do it, made the win during the regular season. Can they double up on Florida this year and get 2 wins versus the Gators? Next up, you will have LSU. Now, this LSU team is one that has a lot of firepower coming in, right? You've got Malaysia Fulwale, who was over at South Carolina, made the transfer, and now she's going to be at LSU. Is that LSU team now with that dynamic guard tandem now that they're going to have? Going to be able to get back to the place where they are competing for SEC championships. You are going to be, you're going to get them at home. Last time LSU made the trip to Neville Arena, Auburn was able to get the victory. Can they hand Kim Mulkey another L inside of Neville Arena? Going to Texas A&M, a team that for the last couple of years has been dealing with some injuries with some key pieces going into the season. Is Texas A&M ready to rebound and start to get to a place where they're being a little bit more competitive? They lose some of their senior leadership off of that team. How well have they've been able to reshuffle the deck? We will find out soon, but you make the trip to College Station to face them there on February 15th. You're at Missouri, another team that honestly wasn't very good last year. One of the few wins that Auburn was able to pull off. Can they get that Missouri team on the road this year and figure out a way to get a dub there? Georgia, not a very good team last year, but Auburn did not win that game last year. So can Auburn get a little vengeance versus Georgia? Now, Georgia has recruited really well, and actually one of the players for Auburn going into this season was previously a Georgia recruit. Harrison, Kolabali was initially a recruit for Georgia. She was supposed to be going to Georgia. She flipped her commitment over to Auburn once Coach Larry Vickers got hired. But that team has a couple of 5 stars that were on that roster that are coming in. So they are kind of reshuffling the deck and getting some talent there on that team. So we'll see whether or not Georgia's ready to make some sort of ascension there in the SEC with the talent that they have. Kentucky, another team that Auburn didn't fare so well against last year. Are they able to do a little bit better? They'll have that game at home in Neville this time. Can Auburn, Kentucky, another team, lost a lot of talent off of last year's roster, but they bring back a lot of talent as well. They had amazing length last year. They will continue to have that again this year. And then you finish it off versus Arkansas, another team that I think Auburn should have beaten last year, wasn't able to do that. But a team this year, again, they lose some veteran leadership off of that team. How well did they restack the deck? You'll be making the trip to Bud Walton to play them to finish off SEC play. Now, the question's a little bit different because I don't know how many of you are actually avid women's basketball watchers. And I just rattled off multiple teams that are going to be super talented, and Auburn's going to have a tough time. What do you think that Auburn can get to 500 this year in SEC play? Last year, I was pretty confident that they were going to do that and make a run into the NCAA tournament, but that was, contingent on the fact that Talia Scott was actually going to be healthy and you had multiple scoring options there for that team, and thinking they were going to be better defensively, but you had injuries that kind of derailed their ability to be better defensively at the beginning of the season. And of course, we already talked about Talia Scott not playing for the vast majority of the year, so they just never really got on track offensively. But the question is, can this Auburn team get to 500 in the SEC? Where can they sneak wins, right? So if you're looking at games, if we're doing like boss toss loss types of situations for them to start just at the beginning of the year. I didn't do this with men's basketball just because I think the men's basketball picture is a little bit more optimistic for them because of how they've been winning over there. But on the women's side, we don't have that recency of winning. You made an SEC tournament an NCAA tournament run 2 years ago, but last year pretty disastrous there in the SEC. But you've got Mississippi State, who I think is, a team that Auburn could potentially beat next year. I'd have to look at that Mississippi State roster. They lost a lot. I didn't talk about this, but Auburn was able to poach one of the Mississippi State players, right? So that is going to be a bit of a homecoming when she steps into the hump there. And Quinera Montague, who was on Mississippi State's team last year. So you're going to have that as she's going to have a home going there. Two bigs from Mississippi State made their way from Mississippi State to Auburn. Now, I don't know why that's the first time I thought about that, but that's a real thing. But Quinera Montague is going to be there playing against her former team. Tennessee, Texas, tough games, right? Like I don't know if Auburn's made that jump yet. I need to see them play before I'm ready to say those games could be competitive. Florida, I don't know that they've gotten much better during the offseason, so I'm going to go ahead and say that that's a potential competitive game there. I do think that Alabama's going to be a little bit worse this year, even if they've recruited well. So I'll give Auburn an opportunity because, listen, Auburn had an opportunity to win that Alabama game last year. First half, they were dominating that game, and then it just kind of fell apart randomly towards the end of the half, and then Bama came and took control of that game there in the second half. But I'll give Auburn a chance there in that game. I think the Vanderbilt game, you're going to have a tough time. But again, I don't know how pervasive the talent is on that Vanderbilt roster, or if they're just going to be one or two really good players that Auburn has to figure out how to bottle up. And I do believe that Coach Vickers will have a good defensive strategy. And again, the caliber of athletes on this team, I think, is a little bit better this year. And so you may have more bodies you can throw at some of the scores on that team. Oklahoma, size perspective, I still don't love what Auburn is on the interior as far as size. I think it's going to be a difficult game. South Carolina, difficult game. Ole Miss, they've not been a good offensive team. So if you can turn this into a really good defensive battle, I actually give Auburn an opportunity to win that game. Again, you get Florida there. Texas A&M is a game that Auburn could win. Missouri, a game Auburn could win. Georgia, despite having the talent, a game that Auburn could win. And then you get Arkansas. So when I'm looking at this roster and I'm looking at the competition that they have without diving super deep into these other teams, just based upon what I knew from last season and how much shuffling of the deck that they have to do, you get Arkansas, Georgia, Missouri, Texas A&M, Florida, Ole Miss, Vanderbilt, Bama, Florida again, Mississippi State. I think that's 10 games without even knowing what this team looks like, that from a standpoint of that team has a lot of work to do and Auburn has a lot of work to do, that Auburn has an opportunity to go and get wins. And again, I'm not saying they can't win those other games. I need to see the team in action in the non-con before I'm ready to put any stamps on any of that team. Because let's be frank, none of these players have a lot of experience in the P4 on the floor proficient. Like, you got some, Maya Petticourt who's played P4 ball, but she hasn't been the dynamic score that you really need to be able to hang your hat on. But somebody could emerge, and we're waiting to see kind of what that would look like. But we will definitely keep an eye on all of those things. But I want to hear your thoughts. Auburn women's basketball set to make the inaugural Larry Vickers season kickoff here, or tip off, I should say, here later on this year, and looking forward to seeing what that looks like. Go ahead and throw your comments for women's basketball down there in the comment section. If you are listening to this on podcast, I definitely want you to hit me up on Twitter to tell me your thoughts on there. TWR Ike Jones is where I am there. But I'll be back at you guys with more great Auburn basketball content. But until the next time, and as always, War Eagle.